Hello and welcome to another reaction video. This week we're learning more about Warhammer with more lore. This time we're talking about Dreadnoughts, I think. I've always been a big fan of these boxy little boys and it'll be interesting to learn a bit more about them. If you enjoyed this video and you watched along and enjoyed and learned something, don't forget to like and subscribe to both me and More Lore. Join the Discord for chatting and all the other good stuff there. And so, right, without further ado, let's learn some about Dreadnoughts.
Lumbering hulks, elegant constructs, and formidable walking junk heaps. The Dreadnoughts of Warhammer 40k are more than just war suits or tanks with legs. They are the tombs of great heroes given mobility and the war gear they need to bring vengeance upon the very foe that killed them.
That scene was so badass.
Dreadnoughts are revenants wrapped in ceramite wraithbone or scrap. The mere deployment of a dreadnought is often enough to break the enemy's morale completely by itself. Their armaments often rivaling the most heavily equipped tanks, and all of it animated by an enraged veteran soldier, a hero serving even in death. Of course, as faithful servants of the Imperium, we will be focusing on the Dreadnoughts of the Adeptus Astartes, but don't worry, although we have less data on them, we will also be covering some of the Xenos
that's horrifying.
It pays to know the enemy, after all. First off, we need to define our subject. Dreadnoughts are bipedal war machines with heavy armor and some of the most devastating weaponry available. Whatever the size or loadout, each of these walking tanks is an awe-inspiring sight on the battlefield. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of different types and patterns of dreadnoughts specialized for a variety of tasks, but at the end of the day, they all share one key similarity: the dead heroes piloting them. There are plenty of walking war machines in the 40k universe, from the Paragon Warsuit all the way up to the Titans of Mars. But what makes a dreadnought is that they are walking tombs, angry coffins with arms and legs, memorials with machine guns, if you will. In the Imperium, each dreadnought is operated by a space marine wounded beyond the point of recovery, a right reserved only for true heroes or notable battle brothers. They are both blessed and condemned to serve within the steel frame of a mighty war engine, destroying the enemies of humanity for centuries, sometimes even millennia, after their duty would have ended on some faraway battlefield.
A long time.
Most warriors interred into a dreadnought sarcophagus are so horribly maimed that not much of their bodies exist aside from at least part of their brains and spines. So to enhance the capabilities of its pilot, they are fitted with a mind impulse unit which controls every aspect of their new metal body. Weapon systems, sensors, a voxcaster to communicate, and even control over the power output of their compact reactor. Although serving in death is a rare honor,
that's cool. So
its reality
it's kind of like the Dreadnought's its own body,
as we discussed in our recent lecture on the worst jobs in the Imperium. With all bodily sense gone and plagued with phantom pain, the interred hero upon first awakening in their new bodies are often overcome with confusion and fear, further complicated by the sometimes decades a dreadnought will spend in stasis to preserve their minds while traveling from warzone to warzone. This, plus the huge strain that the mind impulse unit puts on the already damaged mind of a pilot, has ultimately led to only a handful of dreadnoughts being used for more than a few centuries, let alone millennia. Names such as Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, Malkarion the War Sage of the Night Lords, or Moriar the Chosen of the Blood Angels are names of interred warriors that have become legends over the 10,000 years of the Long War.
But
we are not here to give a history of these heroes. We're here to look at the many patterns of war machines they pilot. So let's start with the classic, the Castroferum. Often lovingly referred to by 40k players as the Boxknot due to its box-like shape, the Castroferum pattern is not only iconic, but also the most common and versatile of all dreadnoughts. In over 10 millennia of constant battlefield use, the Castroferum has seen combat from the days of the Great Crusade all the way to the Indomitus Crusade. Similarly to power armor, there have even been multiple marks of dreadnoughts, with the most common being the Mark IV and Mark V. What sets the Castroferum apart from other dreadnoughts, aside from its shape, is its thermic reactor. Although less powerful than the power systems used by other dreadnoughts, the thermic reactor is used by a variety of Space Marine vehicles, such as the Rhino, and its production and standardization are so widespread that the Castroferum patterns are extremely easy to produce and repair.
Yeah, you want modular systems.
The thermic reactor does come with a noticeable setback, however. in that it limits the size that the machine can attain, thus causing the frame of the Dreadnought to be smaller than other variants.
Oh, okay.
This limitation does not, however, prevent this pattern from equipping a staggering amount of weapon
It's still
systems.
deadly as hell.
The versatility and easy adaptation of the Castroferum has led it to have the greatest number of
Why are
sub-variants
they
and
weirdly
types
cute as
of
well?
any other Dreadnought frame. Some are specialized for long-range combat, such as the Hellfire variant, where both weapon mounts are given to such powerful weapons as las cannons, missile launchers, plasma cannons, or even autocannons.
Nice.
When the fighting becomes close and personal, some chapters prefer using their Dreadnoughts as brutal melee beasts armed with 2 close combat weapons. This can take a variety of forms, such as the
That
Blood
looks so
Angel's
cool.
unique Furioso Dreadnought, which is also armed with a frag cannon and hull-mounted Magna grapples that are capable of pinning tanks in place to prevent their retreat from a brutal melee onslaught. The Ironclad variants are purpose-built to be the apex siege walkers, coming equipped with additional weapons to destroy close-packed infantry
Holy
in trenches, or with hunter-killer missiles to target enemy tanks and bunkers. There are few fortresses within the galaxy that could deter the might of an ironclad siege dreadnought. Even their melee weapons are formidable, as they are
Christ,
more
look
than
at that.
capable of using seismic hammers for busting walls, dreadnought-sized
They can hold
chain
hammers?
fists for even more tank destruction, and hurricane bolters to shred defending infantry. And among these variants, there are even more specially designed walkers, such as the Librarian Dreadnought, which, despite being designed by the Thousand Sons Primarch Magnus the Red during the Great Crusade,
Dreadnought with psychic
continued to
powers.
find
That's
use amongst the
horrifying.
Blood Angels and Grey Knights of the 42nd millennium. These rare machines allow for an interred psyker to retain some small measure of their original psychic might, making the already formidable power of a dreadnought further amplified with the energies of the warp. Of course, all this only scratches the surface of the Castroferum's box-shaped iceberg, as more subtypes and variants exist, such as those purpose-built for chaplains or the Grim Dark Angel's Mortis variant. And all of those can be further enhanced as their pilots prove their control and become truly venerable, with more and more conflicts under their metaphorical belts. And even though we have covered a lot of sub-patterns here and talked about how common the Castroferum is, it should still be noted that each dreadnought is treated and venerated as a relic. However widespread the Castroferum is in contrast to older variants, a dreadnought always remains a prized relic of a chapter, and they see deployment only in the most crucial of battlefields. The loss of a single one of these ancient war machines is seen as a tragedy.
No.
Currently the oldest dreadnought pattern in use by the Imperium, the Contemptor has become a myth on the battlefield. Contrary to the Castroferum and its smaller and stocky frame, the Contemptor pattern is larger with a more rounded humanoid shape. It was also considered to be one of the more powerful dreadnought of its time, thanks mostly to its implementation of the automatic arc reactor. This arc reactor greatly improved the dreadnought systems, allowing it to achieve increased speed and strength and
more
additional
power.
defensive systems in the form of the aptly named adamantic shielding. The same type of shielding which would later be applied to the storm shields of Space Marine Terminators.
Okay.
Although many weapon systems are shared by Contemptors and Castroferums, it is important to note that the
I love that
Contemptor's higher
design.
power output and advanced systems allowed it to regularly field experimental
I'm
and more
biased
powerful
against
weapons,
salamanders.
such as the Carries pattern assault cannon or the legendary conversion beamers. So it's sad to note that, as with most things after the Great Crusade, the schematics to produce new Contemptor dreadnoughts were lost.
No.
This and the more easily developed production of other dreadnoughts
Somebody
left
write
only
them
a few
down.
of them operable in the modern day of the Imperium. These few active Contemptors are even considered irreplaceable objects of worship and are understandably only allowed to be piloted by the most legendary warriors of the Astartes legions.
Yeah, that makes
It
sense.
might even surprise you to learn that during the fires of the Horus Heresy, some of the only warriors on the battlefield to be a true challenge to the Primarchs, aside from other Primarchs themselves, were actually dreadnoughts.
Damn.
Angron, the Primarch of the World Eaters, found genuine joy in fighting these armored beasts, with a pair of Contemptors even managing to greatly wound a Primarch. In one
Jeez.
such case, Lork, the first master of the Warhounds Legion, came to blows with Lorgar of the Wordbearers on the world of Nucaria, where the traitor
That's
Primarch
seriously
was
impressive.
transforming Angron into a demon. Together with the last librarians of the World Eaters, Lork nearly killed Lorgar, were it not for the intervention of the newly formed demon Angron. Though not quite as versatile as its boxy little brother, Contemptors are renowned for their adaptability, and many legions experimented with unique variants suited to their preferred
That's
method of
epic.
warfare. The first sub-pattern was one developed out of necessity. The Contemptor being a little too expensive to build and maintain was a big problem during the rapid expansion of the Great Crusade, and so the Cordis pattern was designed using less sophisticated or temperamental components. Unfortunately, this led to faster pilot burnout, and Mechanicum put a stop to using them until the Horus Heresy brought about a lack of supplies, and the Cordis made a comeback. Then there's the Mortis pattern, which fills the niche of a heavy ranged support platform by replacing the Walker's heavy power fists.
It makes
with a
sense
pair
if
of
you're just
heavy
going to have
ranged
wounded
weapons
marines,
like
you just need
las
numbers.
cannons, multi-meltas, auto-cannons, or Gary's assault cannons.
Damn,
This
that's a
plus
lot of
its augmented
firepower.
shielding made the Contemptor Mortis a devastating force on the battlefield until the cheaper Castroferum and its Hellfire variant came into service. Now, any remaining Mortis dreadnoughts that survive into the 41st millennium are more often used as anti-air support than anything else. And of course, the Contemptor even had a Psyker variant called the Osiren class,
Nice.
which was designed by Thousand Sons Primarch Magnus the Red, and
He
was
did
the
a lot of
basis for
designing
the
these
Librarian
things.
dreadnoughts that came later. Perhaps the most hilarious subtype of dreadnoughts ever created was the Incendius. It basically is a regular dreadnought, except modified to grant it temporary flight with the inclusion of a dreadnought-scaled jump
They
pack.
fly now?
Forged exclusively on the homeworld of the Blood Angels, the Incendius is designed so that it would not lag behind in the Legion's infamous assaults and lightning
Just imagine
strikes.
that thing flying
Even
through
the
the air.
Custodes, the bodyguards of the Emperor himself, would make use of the Contemptor with a couple of patterns of their own, which we'll go over a little later. But the raw
I bet
power
those
of the
are super
Contemptor
rare.
was a huge factor in the rise of the Astartes legions, and directly led to the technological breakthroughs that would make the Castroferum such a solid and dependable war machine. Let's go right from the oldest pattern to the newest one, the Redemptor Dreadnought. This walker is a newly created variant made in the modern day of the Imperium to accompany the Primaris Astartes,
The missile
created
launcher on
by
the back is an
Archmagus
absolute
Belisarius
beast.
Cawl. These are the current poster boys when it comes to dreadnoughts, and are more than likely the first ones that people being introduced to the setting will have seen, especially if you recently played Space Marine 2.
Yeah.
Modernized in both looks and equipment, the Redemptor was designed to be taller, broader, and better than the models which had come before. The way they sought to achieve this is through the use of fiber muscle bundles and multiple hyperdense reactors in place of the two previously used alternatives. It's important to know that the tech priests who designed the Redemptor were able to fit more power and weapon systems specifically by having no regard for the pilot at all, beyond that of the control mechanisms serving the greater whole. So while the neural links implanted into the pilot allow for miraculous achievements of dexterity and
There's
control,
a catch.
their life force is vastly drained by the energies exerted by the Dreadnought. More often than not, this leaves the pilot as nothing more than a sack of burnt organs to be replaced by the Mechanicus after just a couple of decades, which is definitely a change in the previously reverent treatment of Space Marine heroes.
Yeah, they really don't
Unlike
last
the other
very long.
Dreadnought patterns we have mentioned so far,
I suppose,
the Redemptor
they're
Dreadnought
not,
doesn't
like,
have a lengthy
in pain
service
or
record
tortured
yet,
for that
and
long.
so only has 3 developed sub-patterns, the Brutalis, the Ballistus, and the Invictor Warsuit. While the base Redemptor acts as a well-rounded machine of war going into battle with a massive assault cannon or plasma cannon as a ranged weapon, the Redemptor also makes use of chest-mounted weaponry like Fragstorm grenade launchers, storm bolters, and an Icarus rocket pod for an anti-air defense, as well as a massive power fist which includes an onslaught assault cannon or a heavy flamer. The Brutalis is a brutal close combat vehicle equipped
Those
with
claws
either
are
claws
so
or
cool.
fists specific to the model and attached with a variety of heavy weapons and bolters on its chassis. The Brutalis shows a capability of inflicting ranged damage, but the closer it gets, the more lethal it becomes. The Ballistus, on the other hand, goes into the opposite extreme, preferring ranged warfare with a missile launcher for destroying ground and aerial targets, but also a massive and highly destructive double-barreled las cannon capable of decimating tanks and heavy infantry from afar. Finally, there is the Invictor Warsuit, which is rather unique, as it is the only heavy walker in the Space Marine arsenal not to be piloted by a mortally wounded hero.
Oh.
These machines are used for stealth
that's
operations
cool.
and hit-and-run tactics, which remain rather baffling due to their monstrous size. However, as this variant is
Well, you
not
need
a
to bring
true
some
dreadnought,
awesome
we won't be spending
firepower.
any more time on it. The Redemptor and its subtypes closely mimic the Castroferum, paying a close homage with upscaled, up-armored versions of the most popular variants of the Venerable Walker. The question now only remains, what other variants will we see in the future? The Dreadnought Dreadnought was designed for one job and one job only: to bombard the enemies of mankind with an eye-watering amount of munitions.
It does look like it does it very well.
Originally developed using the Contemptor Dreadnought as a base, the Dreadnought was created during the time of the Great Crusade as one of the first real joining of Martian and Terran technologies. Although a rare weapon on the battlefield and highly valued by any commander, this boat-shaped walker was able to carry 5 different ranged weapon mounts.
Damn.
Within its chest were 2 slots for smaller anti-infantry
size of that
weapons,
missile
such
launcher.
as heavy flamers or heavy bolters, while its arm mounts were able to house some of the most powerful ranged weapons the Space Marine Legions had access to. To add even more destructive power, the Tech Priests added a variety of massive missiles on its back, or even a shield generator. The Dreadnought became the ultimate support walker, a nightmare for tanks and aircraft alike, and if deployed in a defensive posture, these dreadnoughts caused disgusting amounts of damage among their enemies. This pretty much established the Dreadnought as the go-to test platform for a variety of Adeptus Astartes weaponry, with weapons like the Volkite Falconet and Boreas air defense missiles being prime examples of weapons originally tested through the platform. This change in direction from Contemptor to Dreadnought caused many difficulties in their manufacturing because it turned out that the Dreadnought was extremely resource intensive to produce and distribute, not to mention arm, even by Dreadnought standards. However, this would not stop demand from increasing after the events of the Horus Heresy, as its extreme firepower caused both Loyalist and Chaos Legions to request or acquire these dreadnoughts more and more. The specialty of this pattern has left no room for any real variations of sub-patterns being developed, and instead any variations were presented through the different weapons equipped.
It's just very good at its job.
These weapons can range from the previously mentioned Volkite Falconets and Boreas air defense missiles to the imposing Arachnus heavy las cannon battery, the massive Hellfire plasma cannonade, and the terrifying Anvilus autocannon battery. But even though the Dreadnought was clearly the king of firepower, it still looked like a child's plaything next to our next entry. It's time to take a look at the Leviathan. Towering over even other Imperial dreadnoughts, the Leviathans were scarcely produced, and even more scarcely deployed, as the resources required to make this amalgamation of Dark Age technologies could rival even that of the Imperial Knights. Some within the Imperium even suspected the Leviathan was designed to kill and counteract the automata of the Martian Mechanicum, a way for the Imperium to gain ultimate control, a suspicion that was supported by the fact that the Emperor himself commissioned them to be manufactured in secret on Terra, and it was purposefully hidden from the gaze of the Mechanicum. Their limited numbers also made them a feared sign on the battlefield, as these indomitable siege units would shadow even the modern Imperial walkers. Understandably, the Mechanicum themselves were said to have been uncomfortable by their existence.
Yeah, I bet.
The Leviathan Dreadnought was originally designed for siege warfare, coming equipped
with siege claws and drills to tear apart
tanks and fortifications alike. In addition, the gigantic frame and powerful reactors could support the use of devastating weaponry like grav flux bombards, cyclonic melta lances, and quad-barreled Leviathan storm cannons.
Jesus Christ.
With secondary weapon mounts focusing on anti-tank and anti-infantry, the Leviathan remains the most dangerous dreadnought ever fielded, only being rivaled by the best of the Custodes variants like the Telemon. The rare few that have survived to the current millennia are hidden within the vaults of their chapters to be used only in the most dire time of need, as most are piloted by warriors who have been living this horrific afterlife since the heresy and are understandably a little unhinged at the best of times.
Yeah.
One of the few examples of a Leviathan seeing combat in the 41st millennia would be the former High Lord Commander of the Red Scorpions, Carib Culn, now known as the Risen. Surprisingly, Lord Culn still holds senior command of the chapter when awoken, and his vendetta against Huron Blackheart still continues in death, the chapter relentlessly hunting down the Red Corsairs to this very day. Although the Custodes are different from the Space Marines in many ways, it might interest you to know that even they are not above using dreadnoughts, and in fact, likely started the trend among Imperial super soldiers. As you would expect, however, Custodes dreadnoughts are the most advanced and shiniest walkers in the entire Imperium.
Of course.
The heroes of the Custodians who are interred into a dreadnought
armor
form a
looks
group
so
called
cool.
the Moritoi, and the first of these dreadnoughts were gifted an inscription carved upon its hull by the Emperor himself. It would be the first of these Mortoi who would coin and popularize the phrase,
"Even in death I still serve."
Nice.
only venerable and master-crafted Contemptors were fit to be the bare minimum accepted into the Emperor's personal bodyguard. The Contemptor Achilles is the first of these and most common of the Mortoi, with Custodes inside
Says
often
common,
being
but
in
I
a worse
bet
condition than their
taking
Space
down a
Marine
Custodes was
counterparts.
super rare.
After all, it takes a lot more damage to drop a Custodes warrior.
Yeah.
The advanced Achilles is honed to be a deadly weapon by the still intact mind of its pilot, with its equipment and fighting style mimicking that of the regular Custodes warrior. A massive guardian spear called a Dread Spear that exchanges the usual bolter with a Corvlaz pulsar, and wrist-mounted weapons that can range from the standard storm bolters and incinerators to the terrifying Adrathic destructors. The Contemptor Galatis simply replaces the Dread Spear for a massive Galatis Warblade and Praesidium shield. Of course, these
That's
were only
insane.
the basic dreadnoughts
Something
of the
that big
Custodes.
needing a shield
There
as well.
exists a bigger, more impressive version for the greatest of the Imperium's heroes, the Telamon Heavy Dreadnought.
Holy
The Telamon
crap.
is the pinnacle of Imperial Dreadnought design, superior even to the Leviathan, dwarfing every other walker available until you get to the Imperial Knights anyway. And it's not just huge, but agile as well, outmaneuvering its lumbering cousins and even appearing to be as precise or faster than the best living Custodes in the 10,000.
Jesus.
To be interred within a Telamon is the highest honor any Custodes could be given. With a mere handful in the entire galaxy, even its weapons are custom-built and designed to unleash their own unique terror upon the battlefield. Plasma projectors, bolt
that's the
launchers,
biggest,
storm cannons, and accelerator
machine
culverins,
that's
and
below a
a
Titan,
powerful
then.
refractor field to protect it all.
That's
it is
insane.
a rare enemy indeed that could even hope to stand in the way of a Telamon. Now, it is to be expected that the Chaos Space Marines, being the traitorous former warriors of the Imperium, would have their own nightmarish version of Dreadnoughts. But where the Imperium treats those interred within a Dreadnought as heroes, being placed within a Chaos Hellbrute is nothing short of a lifetime prison sentence. Although Hellbrutes are sometimes referred to as Chaos Dreadnoughts, it should be noted that the Traitor Legions still maintain some of the older, more venerable variants of Dreadnoughts, just like their Loyalist chapter counterparts. Hellbrutes, however, are mutated nearly beyond recognition.
I was going
and
to
are
say,
a
they don't look
nightmare on
very
the
mechanical.
battlefield. These mountains of steel and demon flesh were once ordinary Dreadnoughts, but due to the corrupting powers of chaos, they have become warped and insane, little more than screaming berserkers. Over time,
they're
the pilot's
pretty,
body melds with the
they're
machine,
pretty manic when you're fighting them in
enveloping
Space
to the
Marine
point
2.
where all that is left of them are madmen wanting only to cause destruction to dull the pain of their hellish existence. What might even be worse than being punished with becoming a pilot for a Hellbrute would being tricked into it, which has been known to happen. There is no standardization for these horrible monstrosities, but most take the rough form of the Castroferum Dreadnought with its boxy shape and wide stance. As a result, its weaponry ends up being similar to its Imperial counterparts, but with the addition of some horrifying and fleshy melee weapons like scourges, flails, and hammers. Leave it to the ruinous powers to make something as horrible as a Dreadnought's existence even worse.
Yeah.
If mimicry is the highest form of flattery, then orcs must have a lot of positive things to say about Space Marine Dreadnoughts.
Yeah.
Orc Def Dreads, called Orc Dreadnoughts back in the 2nd and 3rd editions, are a twisted scrap heap version of the Space Marine Castroferum.
Nice.
Unlike Space Marines, however, the pilot of a Def Dread is a willing volunteer who enjoys the rattling, clanking of its legs and
Yeah, I
rumbling
bet they
of
think
its
it's
engine.
fun to pilot one.
Def Dreads, on occasion, have even been found to be able to go toe-to-toe with the best of the Imperium's Dreadnoughts. Imposing figures, Def Dreads are usually piloted by orcs directly wired and forever connected to their war machine, giving up a good amount of their innate orkiness to achieve something greater. Although favoring not 2 but often 4 deadly close combat weapons, these machines are often equipped with big shootas, rocket launch pads, scorchas, and custom mega blastas, making
Nice.
each Def Dread a one-of-a-kind marvel of walking scrap. But the Def Dread also has a smaller cousin known as the Killican, which is more
Killican.
or less the Grot version of the Scrap Walker, a smaller, more agile machine geared
It
more
literally
to
does
ranged
look like a
combat than
can.
melee. In fact, Grots are even more excited to be given the opportunity to pilot a Killican than an Orc is a Def Dread, as the massive power boost allows the
Yeah, I
usually
bet,
tiny
because they're so
creatures
small.
to finally get one over on their orcish bullies. Notable variants of the Def Dread include the Big Mech Dread, which is piloted by a mech boy.
I can just
instead of a
imagine a
regular
Grot
orc,
inside one of them
and is
just going
normally clever
absolutely
enough to
ham on
avoid
his
wiring
fellow
himself
orcs.
directly into his machine, and so can get out whenever he wants. Another imposing monster of a combat walker is the Mega Dread and the Mecha Dread, which is capable of facing anything from Redemptor Dreadnoughts all the way to Imperial Knights, but are rarely seen on the battlefields of the 42nd millennium. Elegant and powerful, graceful and beautiful, calling an Eldari Wraithlord a Dreadnought is a bit like comparing a swan to a pelican. Sure, they're both large birds, but they're not exactly competing in the looks department.
Insane.
However, if there is
Really
one
pretty,
tradition
though.
shared between the Eldari and the Space Marines, it's the treatment of their fallen warriors, as both seek to honor and keep their memory alive in their unique ways. Although Space Marines do this via gene seed recovery and relic equipment, the Eldari do this in a more literal way, using Spirit Stones. Spirit Stones are carried by every Eldari to keep their soul from being consumed by the Chaos God
so it's
Slanesh.
powered by their soul as
Upon
opposed
death,
to
the
their
Spirit
body.
Stones prevent a warrior's soul from reaching the warp and are collected and placed within the Infinity Circuit, a sort
That's
of
clever.
ghost internet at the heart of every craft world, where an Eldari may still grant their wisdom to the rest of their kind through psychic communion. Yet this is not the end for some Eldari, as the Spirit Stone could be used to power various Wraith constructs, such as Wraith Guards, Wraith Lords, and Wraith Knights.
I suppose when
to
they
name a
really
few.
need
The craft
like, the
world
numbers.
Eldari make almost everything out of Wraithbone, a psychically active plastic-like material that is literally sung into shape by bone singers. It's stronger than plasteel and harder to damage than adamantium. Wraithbone is a wonderfully flexible material that can be controlled by anyone with the talent to do so, which is why it's used to make constructs, as the spirits inside their stones have a much
that's a bit
easier
horrifying.
time controlling these new bodies than a Space Marine could ever hope to have with a Dreadnought. Of the known Eldari constructs, the Wraithlord is the most similar to a Dreadnought in both size and its intended purpose, although the average Wraithlord stands taller than even a Leviathan. The spirits that are interred within a Wraithlord are typically great heroes who still have much more to give and are eager to defend their dwindling people. Although much of the construction and variations of these walkers are not known to us, it is interesting to learn that similarly to the Blood Angels Librarian Dreadnought, there is a Wraith Seer variant, which is a Wraithlord driven by the soul of an Eldari Seer, capable of using devastating psychic blasts despite being
Like a
very,
librarian
very
variant.
dead. Typically, a Wraithlord is armed with 2 flamers or shuriken catapults on their wrists, complementing their melee options of either power fists or the enormous Ghostglaive swords. Their hands are free for these options because the heavy weapons are typically shoulder-mounted, giving the Wraithlord a height advantage in addition to some versatility. These heavy weapons are very similar to the Astartes Dreadnoughts, scatter lasers for shredding infantry, bright lances for tank hunting, and star cannons to blast heavy threats with superheated plasma. Unfortunately, despite having a versatile armory of weapons, Wraithlords are plagued by a phenomenon known as Wraith Sight, where the soul within cannot tell which dimension they are in, resulting in the warrior acting slower and even stopping mid-combat as they become confused.
Oh, that
To
sucks.
prevent a friendly fire incident from happening, Wraithlords are often guided into battle by Spirit Seers, who can aid the construct,
they need a
acting as
handler.
a sort of psychic tech marine and psychic seeing eye dog all in one. Regardless of their disabilities, a fight between a Wraithlord and another Dreadnought is a terrifying and awe-inspiring
Yeah, I
sight.
bet.
A poetic battle between the deadly grace of a dying people and the brutal wrath of the younger races. Dreadnoughts are a deeply flavorful part of 40k, and it makes sense that many of the armies in the universe have some sort of equivalent, and there are still Imperial variants we never covered because there's only a passing mention of them and nothing more. But impractical stomping war machines driven by dead warriors being slowly driven insane by their horrific existence is extremely 40k, and we hope GW keeps adding to their story.
Yeah.
But what about you all? Are there any other Dreadnoughts you'd like us to cover? What other Dreadnoughts would you like Games Workshop to add? And if you could design one yourself, what would it look like? Let us know down in the comments
that's a
below,
challenge.
and make sure you like and subscribe for the next time you might be in need of more lore.
Well, I certainly learned a lot more in this video. Yeah, it's always nice to learn a bit more about the units you like, and Dreadnoughts are no exception. It does make me wonder whether we should learn about Titans next, if we go a bit bigger. Don't forget to comment if you would like to see that video, and we can learn more about Titans in the next one. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to both me and More Lore. We've also got a Discord channel that's slowly growing, and we're also on our way to 1,000 subs. We're, I think, about 700 odd at this point. So it's always good if we get some more and we can make it to that 1,000. And right, if that's all I have to say about that, I will see you guys in the next one. I hope you have a nice weekend, and I'll catch you in the next video.